The dash cam footage didn't just end a career. It took down a 22-year empire, built on one simple belief that on Highway 9 in the dark, nobody was watching. Someone was watching. She had been watching from the moment his lights hit her mirror. The pine flatlands of Calhoun Parish, Louisiana, looked like the edge of the known world after dark. Highway 9 cuts through them in a long, indifferent line. 2 lanes cracked asphalt. The occasional reflector post blinking back at headlights, like something half alive. No streetlights on this stretch. No gas stations. No lit windows in any direction. Just the road, the trees, and the specific silence of a place that has never been asked to explain itself to anyone. DEA. Special Agent. Dara Okafor had driven this road before. She knew its rhythms, the way you know a song you never chose to memorize by repetition, by the necessity of the route. She was 38 years old, Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Southeast Narcotics Division, and she had just spent 14 hours in a windowless conference room in Baton Rouge, seated around a table with 17 other federal agents and 3 assistant U.S. attorneys working through the operational debrief on a trafficking interdiction that had taken 11 months to build. The kind of meeting where the coffee runs out by hour 4 and nobody goes home until every loose thread is named and accounted for. She was not in a government vehicle tonight. The task force debrief had run so late that the motor pool was locked by the time it ended, and she had driven her own car down a black Ford Explorer 4 years old, with a dual-lens dashcam bolted behind the rearview mirror. The front lens pointed at the road. The rear lens pointed into the cabin and back through the rear window. She had installed it herself 18 months earlier after a conversation with a colleague that she had never quite been able to put down. "You know what the difference is between you and me on a dark road," her colleague had said. "I have witnesses by default. You have to create them." Dara had gone home that night and ordered the camera. She had never felt the need to explain why to anyone who hadn't already understood. She was in a dark green hoodie, jeans, running shoes. Her DEA credentials were in the leather tote on the passenger seat sitting right on top. Gold shield in its wallet holder. Laminated photo ID. Bold letters across the top. Drug Enforcement Administration. Her Glock 19 sat in its holster on her right hip, concealed under the hoodie. She was tired in the specific way that accumulates, not just in the body, but in the structure of the mind. The kind of tired where the world feels slightly less real than it should, where you find yourself looking forward to a cold dinner and a hot shower with an intensity that approaches grief. She was doing 57 in a 60. She checked the speedometer the way she always checked it on a dark road in rural Louisiana. Not from fear, from practicality, from 17 years of understanding that the gap between what she was doing and what she could be accused of doing needed to be documented, not assumed. She reached for her water bottle. Her fingers had barely closed around it when the interior of the Explorer ignited with red and blue light. She set the bottle back down without drinking. Speedometer 57. Mirror. The patrol car was close. Too close given that she had not been speeding and had not drifted. It had come up fast, which meant it had been sitting somewhere in the trees, with its lights off, engine idling, waiting. She exhaled. Sharp. Specific. Not fear annoyance sharpened into something more useful. She knew what was about to happen. She had no shortcut through it. She signaled, decelerated with deliberate smoothness, and pulled onto the gravel shoulder in a single controlled movement. The movement of someone who understands that everything she does in the next 60 seconds will be interpreted as evidence of something. The gravel crunched under her tires. The patrol car's spotlight activated and caught her side mirror at the precise angle to be blinding. She placed both hands on the top of the steering wheel. Fingers spread wide and lowered her window. In the side mirror, she watched the officer approach, broad-shouldered, heavy-set, moving with the unhurried swagger of a man who had not been seriously challenged in a very long time. His hand was already resting on the grip of his holstered weapon before he had reached the B-pillar of her car. Not from tactical caution, from habit, from the settled certainty of a man who had learned over many years on a dark road with no witnesses that he was the most dangerous thing in any situation he chose to enter. Dara's training cataloged it in real time quietly. Aggressive posture. No announcement of the reason for the stop. Hand on weapon before first contact. He's not nervous. He's comfortable. He's done this before. She waited. His nameplate read, Pruitt, in black letters on silver. 44 years old. 17 years with the Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department. In those 17 years, 9 commendations for arrest volume, 3 formal complaints from black motorists on Highway 9, all 3 routed to internal affairs. All 3 closed without investigation, twice by the same reviewing supervisor, once personally by Sheriff Dale Macon, who had signed the closure form on a Tuesday afternoon and been at the golf course by 3. Cole Pruitt was not a stupid man. He was something more specific and considerably more dangerous, a man who had learned over 2 decades that the rules applied to everyone except him, who had been consistently and materially rewarded for believing this, and who had inhabited that belief long enough that it no longer felt like a belief. It felt like a fact of physics, a property of the world. He did not think of himself as corrupt. He thought of himself as someone who understood how things actually worked, as opposed to how people in comfortable cities with law degrees preferred to pretend they worked. He stopped at the B-pillar just behind Dara's line of sight, forcing her to turn her head awkwardly to look at him. A tactic so practiced, it was unconscious now. Control the angle. Control the interaction. His body camera displayed a solid red light. Malfunction. 3rd time this month. His patrol car's dash cam was mounted low on the windshield, angled to capture the hood and road ahead, not the shoulder. This had been pointed out to him twice in equipment reviews. Both times it had been noted, and nothing had been done. License and registration. No greeting. No reason for the stop. Just the opening demand of a transaction whose terms he had already decided. Dara turned her head. She looked at his face, the heavy jaw, the eyes moving across the interior of her car without landing on hers. Cataloging. Assessing. The back seat, the glove box, the leather of the interior. Anywhere except the face of the person he had just pulled over, as if she were a space rather than a human being occupying one. "Good evening, officer," Dara said. Her voice was calm, professionally neutral. The voice of a woman who had made a deliberate choice not to allow what she felt in her chest to reach her mouth. "I'm going to reach for my purse on the passenger seat to get my ID. Is that all right?" Pruitt did not answer the question. He leaned in closer. Stale tobacco and spearmint gum. His eyes landed on the Explorer's interior, on Dara's hoodie, and then briefly pointedly on her face. "Whose car is this?" "It's mine, officer. I'm going to reach for my identification." "I asked you a question." His hand tightened on his belt. "This is a $60,000 vehicle. You expect me to believe that's yours?" The contempt in it was not even heated. It was flat routine. The contempt of a man who has said a version of this sentence so many times, it has become reflexive. "What is this, you borrowing somebody's car?" Something behind Dara's eyes went very still. This was not a traffic stop. It had never been a traffic stop. It was a fishing expedition, conducted by a man who had run this particular fishing line on this particular road enough times that he no longer bothered disguising the hook. "My name is Dara Okafor," she said. "I am the registered owner of this vehicle. If you run the plates, you will confirm that. Now, why did you pull me over?" Pruitt made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Saw you cross the double yellow back near the tree line. Suspicion of DUI." He straightened. "Step out of the car." "I haven't been drinking," Dara said, "and I did not cross the center line. I have a dual-lens dash cam with front and rear telemetry. It will confirm I maintained my lane throughout. The camera. The word dashcam landed on Pruitt, the way words land on men like him, not as information, but as a challenge. His eyes moved to the windshield, found the small lens behind the mirror. Most officers would have recalibrated right there, found a graceful exit, mumbled something about watching the lane, and moved on. Cole Pruitt had spent 17 years in a county where no one had ever made him recalibrate. The camera didn't scare him. It offended him. It implied a form of accountability he had never once been asked to honor, and the implication lit something in him that had no interest in reason. "Step out of the car," he said, and his hand moved to the retention strap on his holster and unclipped it. Dara ran the variables the way she had been trained, fast, without panic, without the luxury of emotion in the calculation. She was armed. Glock 19 right hip concealed. If she stepped out, and Pruitt saw the weapon's profile before she could establish her identity. Clearly, the scenario that followed had been written before she was born. She had read it in case files in the clinical passive voice language of official reports, where people became subjects and deaths became incidents, and the officer's fear was always reasonable. She had read those files enough times to understand that the language was the final act of a story that had already been decided long before anyone drew a weapon. She could not get out of the car. Not yet. Not like this. "Officer Pruitt." Her voice dropped half an octave, the register she used when briefing a tactical team, when she needed people to hear the seriousness beneath the words, rather than just the words. "I need you to listen carefully. I am a federal law enforcement officer. My credentials are on the passenger seat. I am armed. My weapon is on my right hip. I am not going to exit this vehicle until we de-escalate the situation, because I am concerned that if you see my weapon before you see my credentials, this becomes dangerous for both of us." Pruitt stared at her. The rain that had been building all night began to fall light at first, then heavier drumming against the roof of the Explorer. Then he laughed. Not nervously, not uncertainly. A bark of genuine incredulous amusement, the laugh of a man who has found something so absurd that laughter is the only register available. Federal agent. He looked up and down the empty highway, sharing the joke with the pine trees. "Sure. And I'm the governor of this great state." He leaned back toward the window. "Save it. I've heard every story there is. Officer Pruitt, no." The word came out like a door slamming. He reached for the handle and ripped it open. "Get out. Right now." "I am identifying myself as a law enforcement officer," Dara said. She did not move. "If you physically remove me from this vehicle, you are assaulting a federal agent. That is a federal crime." Pruitt did not care. He reached in with his right hand and grabbed her left arm above the elbow. The grip of a man who had done this many times and never once been told he did it wrong. He pulled hard. He pulled. Dara braced her feet against the floor mat and used the geometry of the vehicle to resist. She did not move toward her weapon. She needed him fully committed. She needed the dashcam to capture everything without ambiguity. "Last warning," Pruitt screamed. He released her arm and stepped back, and his hand flew to his hip. In one practiced motion, the motion of a man who had drawn and reholstered this weapon 1,000 times in 17 years, and never once been made to account for any of them, Officer Cole Pruitt drew his service weapon and leveled it at Dara Okafor's chest. The barrel of a .40 caliber pistol at 18 inches is not merely a visual event. It reorganizes everything. It makes the air feel different. Time slowed the psychological phenomenon of extreme stress compressing and expanding simultaneously. She saw the scratch on the slide of his gun. She saw his dilated pupils. She saw the unhinged certainty in his expression, the look of a man who had already composed the story he would tell afterward and was waiting for the physical world to catch up. His finger was inside the trigger guard. Dara raised her hands, slowly, palms forward. The oldest human gesture. "I am not your enemy. Please don't do this." "Okay," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt, steadier than she had any right to be. My hands are up. Look at me, Pruitt. Look at my face. I am not a threat to you. Put the weapon down and let me show you my credentials. This does not have to go any further than this moment. On the ground, Pruitt screamed. His voice cracked, adrenaline shredding the professional surface. Kick the door open and get face down on the ground right now. Dara did not move toward the door. If she got on the ground, he would cuff her. If he cuffed her, he would find the Glock. And a man in Pruitt's current state, overloaded, primed, having already drawn his weapon, would construct a narrative in the time it took to pull a trigger. She had read that narrative in case files. She was not going to become one. Her left thumb found the panic button on her key fob in the cup holder. She pressed it without looking down. In Atlanta, a light on a board turned red. I'm not getting on the ground, Pruitt. Hands high, fingers spread, eyes locked on his. I am telling you for the last time. I am Special Agent Dara Okafor, Drug Enforcement Administration, badge number 7731. My supervising ASAC is Marcus Webb, Southeast Regional Division, Baton Rouge Field Office. If you pull that trigger, there is no version of what follows that ends well for you. There is no hole deep enough. There is no story good enough. Put the weapon down. Something in the specificity of it. Badge number supervisor's name, field office, found a crack in the concrete of his certainty. The gun lowered by a fraction. Not enough to matter physically. Enough to tell Dara that doubt had entered the room, even if it was a small room and barely had space to stand. She pressed the opening. Check the bag. Left hand. I move it slowly. You keep the weapon on me, but you check the bag. If I grab anything else, you do what you have to do. But look first. Pruitt hesitated. His tongue moved over his lower lip. He glanced up the highway. The reflex of a man who suddenly needed to know whether anyone was watching. The rain fell heavier. Slow, he said. Dara moved her left hand with surgical precision, inch by inch, telegraphing every movement. Hooked a finger around the strap of the leather tote, dragged it across the console, flipped the flap with 2 fingers. Right on top, the gold shield in its leather wallet holder. Beside it, her DEA photo. ID in laminate. The words, Drug Enforcement Administration, in white on federal blue. She turned the wallet toward the window. The interior light of the Explorer caught the gold and threw it back at him like an accusation. Pruitt squinted. He leaned in, the gun still up, but his posture changed, a slackening involuntary. As his eyes moved over the seal, the photograph, the name. He looked at the shield. He looked at her. He looked at the shield again. And then, incredibly, in real time as Dara watched it happen, the arrogance came back. Not as confidence. Confidence had left the building. This was something older and more reflexive, the last-ditch defense of a man whose entire identity had been built on never being wrong, and who could not process being wrong even with a federal badge 3 feet from his face. He holstered his weapon. He did not apologize. He crossed his arms over his chest and leaned against the doorframe of the Explorer with a smirk that cost him considerably more effort than it appeared to. Well, I'll be damned, Pruitt said. You had that made. That is actually impressive. Where do you order something like that? Dara stared at him. In 17 years of federal law enforcement, she had encountered denial in many forms. But the specific density of this, a man who had seen a gold DEA shield and in real time decided it was a prop, was something she would think about for a long time afterward. Excuse me, heard you fine. The smirk widened brittle at the edges. I've seen these before. Little novelty shops, online stores. You think flashing some tin means I'm going to salute. You're a civilian and you are in very serious trouble. Impersonating a federal officer, that's a felony on its own. I'm adding it to the DUI. He reached for his shoulder radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Highway 9 mile marker 34. I've got a combative suspect female black driving a black Explorer. She's in possession of what appears to be a fraudulent federal badge. I need a transport and a tow. She's going to the parish jail." Dara watched him speak into the radio. She felt something shift inside her. Not calm. Not quite. The eye of the storm. The cold crystalline clarity that arrives when you realize that the worst has already happened, and what comes next is simply consequence. He had called it in. He was on the record. He had confirmed the stop, the location, his intent. He had described the badge he had seen and dismissed. In the log of the Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department dispatch system, every word he had just spoken was now time-stamped and archived and available for subpoena. He had sealed his own fate with his own voice on his own radio, because he was too certain of himself to consider that he might need to be careful. She slowly lowered her hands. "You made your call, Pruitt," she said quietly. He grinned. "Yeah. I called your ride to jail." "Good." She reached for her phone on the center console. Not for the badge, not for anything else. Just the phone face down beside the cup holder. It was already paired to the Explorer's Bluetooth. "Because I'm making mine." "Who are you calling?" "Your lawyer." Dara pressed a speed dial number. She held Pruitt's eyes while it rang once. "No," she said. "The cavalry." The line connected. The voice that came through the Explorer's speakers was crisp, alert, and carried the particular controlled energy of a tactical operations center running at full capacity. Not the voice of a lawyer, not the voice of a friend, the voice of a place with moving parts and a very clear chain of authority. "Okafor, this is DEA, Southwest Regional Dispatch. We have your panic beacon active and your GPS position confirmed. Are you in immediate danger?" The color left Pruitt's face in a single comprehensive wave. "Agent in distress," Dara said. Her eyes did not leave his. She watched his expression process what he was hearing and find no framework for it. "Highway 9, Calhoun Parish, mile marker 34. Armed hostile at my window. Local law enforcement officer. Cole Pruitt, Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department." He drew and brandished his service weapon. "He is attempting an unlawful arrest and has refused to acknowledge federal credentials. I am requesting immediate assistance. Copy, Agent Okafor. We have your position. Tactical unit is 11 minutes out, returning from an I-49 narcotics operation. Surveillance helicopter is airborne approximately 6 minutes from your location. Highway patrol is being alerted to restrict Highway 9 north and south of your position. Do not engage unless fired upon. Help is coming." Pruitt looked at his radio. He looked at the phone in the cup holder. He looked at the sky, an involuntary upward glance, as if he had already heard something that hadn't arrived yet. And then, from somewhere above the rain, distant at first, and then rapidly, urgently, less distant, came the rhythmic, unmistakable pressure of rotor blades cutting through Louisiana air. Dara let herself smile. It was a cold, precise smile. The smile of a woman who had been patient for a specific purpose and was now watching that patience collect its return. "You hear that, Pruitt?" she said softly. "That's not a lawyer." The sound of a helicopter at close range is not a noise. It is a physical fact. It lives in the sternum, in the molars, in the soles of the feet. It turns the air into something turbulent and aggressive, whips the rain. Horizontal makes the world feel suddenly, inescapably small, in a way that has nothing to do with geography. Officer Cole Pruitt stood frozen on the gravel shoulder of Highway 9, with his hand still wrapped around his radio and his face turned upward into a column of white light that descended from the darkness above him, with the absolute impersonal certainty of something that has not come to negotiate. The Bell helicopter's searchlight pinned him to the asphalt. The rain slapped against his face, driven sideways by the rotor wash. He raised one arm to shield his eyes. There was no direction to look that wasn't the light. Then the ground units arrived. No sirens. 4 black Chevrolet Suburbans came around the curve in tight formation, engines, roaring tires biting the wet gravel, and executed a hard stop that boxed in Pruitt's patrol car and Dara's Explorer simultaneously. Doors opened before the vehicles had fully stopped. Federal agents poured onto the shoulder in plate carriers, and ballistic helmets, carbines raised, moving with the practiced economy of people who have done this many times and gotten it right every time. Federal agents. Drop the radio. Hands on top of your head. Do it now. Pruitt stumbled backward. His boots slipped in the mud at the shoulder's edge. His brain was attempting to process a visual reality for which 17 years on Highway 9 had given him no preparation. Moments ago, he was the most powerful thing on this road. Now he was looking at 6 rifle barrels and a green laser sight that had settled on the center of his chest with the patience of something that had already made its decision. "I'm a deputy sheriff." His voice had shed every layer of authority it had ever possessed. What remained was thin and high and searching. "I'm Calhoun Parish. You've got the wrong on the ground. Now." His knees gave way. Not from command, from the sudden total failure of every structure that had been holding him upright. He hit the gravel hard. The sharp stones dug through his uniform trousers. The radio clattered from his hand and disappeared into a puddle. 2 agents were on him before the echo of his knees hitting gravel had finished. Knee into his lower back. Wrists taken with efficient practiced force and wrenched behind him. Click, click, click. Cole Pruitt had heard handcuffs close 1,000 times. He had loved that sound. It had been for 17 years the sound of authority confirming itself. The sound of winning. But heard from this angled cheek against cold, wet gravel mud in his nose, the smell of exhaust from 4 government vehicles, it sounded like nothing so much as a door closing from the outside. Permanent. Final. Weapon secure, an agent called, stripping Pruitt's pistol from his holster. Subject secured. The helicopter moved to a holding pattern, the deafening wash reducing to a sustained thrum. The searchlight remained wide now, illuminating the entire scene in white that left no shadows and no ambiguity. From the passenger door of the lead Suburban stepped ASAC Marcus Webb, tall, lean, dark suit under a DEA windbreaker, walking across the gravel shoulder of Highway 9, with the heavy measured purpose of a man whose dinner has been interrupted by a direct threat to one of his agents. He did not run. He did not hurry. He stepped over Pruitt's prone body, the way you step over debris on a sidewalk without breaking stride, without acknowledgement, and went directly to the driver's door of the Explorer. Dara opened it and stepped out. She was still holding her phone. She holstered her Glock and smoothed the front of her hoodie with one hand. "You okay, Okafor?" Webb's voice was low. "I'm good, Marcus." She gestured toward Pruitt. He didn't breach the vehicle. He drew on me, full intent finger in the guard safety off. He refused credentials twice and attempted a physical removal before drawing. "It's all on the dashcam upload and the open dispatch line." Webb turned slowly and looked at Pruitt. The expression on his face was not anger. It was something colder and more durable, the expression of a man who has seen this story too many times and is finally irrevocably in a position to end this particular telling of it. Then Webb did something that Dara would think about later. He looked at Pruitt for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked away as if he had completed a visual task that no longer required his attention and turned back to Dara. "Let's get him up," he said. "We're going to his department." It was, she understood, the most devastating thing he could have done. He had looked at Cole Pruitt, a man who had spent 17 years demanding to be the center of every room he walked into, and found him not worth lingering on. The agents hauled Pruitt to his feet. Soaked through uniform, muddy from collar to knee face, carrying the mottled red-gray of a man whose body is still running on adrenaline, while his mind has begun to understand what has happened. He had lost his hat in the gravel somewhere. Without it, without the holster and the posture and the practiced swagger, he was just a heavy-set man in his mid-40s, standing in a pool of federal floodlight, and the diminishment of him was visible and complete. "You cannot do this," he said. The words were searching for the old register, the one that had commanded, that had worked on this highway for 17 years, and finding it simply gone like reaching for a tool that isn't there. I am a sworn officer. This is kidnapping. I want my union rep. I want Sheriff Macon on the phone. Dara walked to him. She stopped 2 feet away, close enough for him to see her face clearly, in the searchlight far enough that nothing could be called impulsive. She looked at him for a moment without speaking, not to savor it, because she wanted him to understand that she had been looking at him clearly from the very beginning, that her clarity had never once wavered, and that nothing about this moment was a surprise to her. Then she reached into her back pocket and produced the gold shield. She held it up in the floodlight, steady level, the DEA seal catching the white and throwing it back with the particular luminosity of something earned rather than assumed. You wanted to see my credentials, Pruitt. She let him look at it for 3 full seconds. Special Agent Dara, Okafor, Drug Enforcement Administration. Her voice was quiet enough that he had to lean slightly toward her to hear it over the helicopter. You are under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon on a federal officer, deprivation of rights under color of law, and unlawful detention. She let the shield drop to her side. I was tired, she said. Even quieter now. Personal. I just wanted to go home. That's all you had to let me do, Pruitt. That's all this ever had to be. She looked at him for 1 more second, not with anger, not with triumph, with something closer to the particular sadness of watching a thing happen that did not have to happen. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it. Pruitt stared at the badge, then at her face. The reality settled over him in stages, first as disbelief, then as a kind of nauseating comprehension, and finally, as the specific hollow recognition of a man who understands that the game he has been playing just ended, that it ended the moment he turned his lights on, and that everything that follows is simply consequence finding its way to the surface. This is a mistake, he whispered. Macon, the sheriff, won't. Put him in the transport, Dara said to the nearest agent. We're going to his department. The heavy door of the Suburban closed behind Pruitt with a sound that had nothing triumphant in it, only final. Dara stood on the gravel shoulder and looked up at the helicopter holding its pattern overhead. She allowed herself 1 long, slow exhale. And just then, when no one was watching, when Webb was speaking into his radio, and the agents were processing the scene, she looked down at her right hand. It was shaking, not from fear, not anymore. From the adrenaline of everything that had not happened, all the versions of tonight that had existed as real possibilities 20 minutes ago and no longer did. She closed her hand into a fist, held it for 3 seconds and opened it again. Then she got back to work. The Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department sat on a dead-end spur off Parish Road, 12 miles from the nearest traffic light, in a squat brick building from 1979 that had been maintained with the minimum investment necessary to remain technically functional. Chain link fence, rusted razor wire, a parking lot that had needed repaving since the previous decade, 3 halogen poles casting the property in a yellowish light that made everything look slightly unwell. For 22 years, it had been the operational center of Sheriff Dale Macon's domain, and Macon had run Calhoun Parish the way certain men run certain places. Not with the accountability of elected office, but with the settled, expansive authority of someone who had been in the seat long enough that the seat had stopped feeling like a public trust and started feeling like a personal possession. The DEA convoy arrived at 12:47 in the morning. 6 Suburbans, 2 unmarked sedans, a mobile command unit. No sirens. The convoy rolled into the parking lot in a formation that made its purpose unmistakable, and the chain link gate was already open, which meant Pruitt's frantic radio call before his arrest had reached the station, and someone inside had been awake and listening. The front doors opened 40 seconds after the first vehicle stopped. Sheriff Dale Macon came out first, 6 feet, and change broad through the chest and gut. Silver hair, cropped close posture, that broadcast authority the way certain buildings broadcast money. He wore his uniform even at this hour, pressed buttoned the American flag pin on his collar precise. His eyes moved across the vehicles and the agents and the federal plates with an expression that was notably and specifically annoyed rather than alarmed. Behind him, 4 deputies arranged themselves in the loose formation of men, taking their emotional cues from the man in front. Macon took his time, getting to the edge of the parking lot. He looked at the convoy. He looked at the tactical gear. He put a toothpick between his teeth. What in the name of he began? Dara stepped out of the second Suburban. She had put on her DEA windbreaker, dark blue yellow letters across the back, and her badge was forward on her hip, prominently displayed. She walked to the front of the line, flanked by Webb and 2 agents with MP5s at the low ready, and stopped 12 feet from Macon. "I'm in charge here," she said. Macon looked at her. His eyes moved over her face, her jacket, her badge, and back to her face, with the methodical assessment of a man running a calculation. And then he did something that told Dara more than anything he could have said before he spoke a single word to her. He reached into his breast pocket and took out his phone, looked at the screen for 3 seconds, and put it away. He was making a call. Silently before the conversation began, he was activating whatever network of protection he had spent 22 years building. He wasn't panicking. He was executing a procedure. "He's more dangerous than Pruitt," Dara noted, by a significant distance. "You're the one Pruitt called in," Macon said, the impersonator. "I'm Special Agent Dara Okafor, DEA, she said. "I have your Officer Cole Pruitt in federal custody. We have him on dashcam footage, drawing his service weapon on a federal agent and attempting an unlawful arrest. We have the full audio on an open dispatch line." Macon crossed his arms. "You don't have custody of anything in my county without my authorization." He stepped forward, not threatening exactly, but occupying space with the deliberate calm of a man who has used presence as leverage for 2 decades. "Now you release my deputy. You remove these vehicles from my property, and we can have a conversation like professionals in the morning. Otherwise, I will arrest every one of you for obstruction." Webb stepped forward and produced the warrant. Federal warrant, Sheriff. Signed by Magistrate Judge Patricia Hollins in New Orleans at 11:52 tonight. Title 18. Section 242. This supersedes your county jurisdiction entirely. If you interfere, you become an accessory. If your deputies draw their weapons, this becomes a federal standoff with consequences that will define the rest of your career. He held the warrant out. I'd read it. Macon looked at the warrant without taking it. Something moved across his face, quickly controlled, but there. He recognized something. A name. The name of the judge Dara realized. Macon knew Magistrate Judge Patricia Hollins. More than that, the specific minute tightening around his eyes suggested that knowing her name was not a neutral piece of information. He did not explain this. He looked at Webb, then at Dara. "Pruitt's a good deputy," he said, shifting registers from aggression to the flat bureaucratic cool of a man rerouting. Aggressive. That's what a road like Highway 9 at night requires. Maybe there was a miscommunication. Maybe the driver— "It's not a miscommunication," Webb said. "It's a federal crime on high-definition video with synchronized audio. And it's not the last thing we're looking at tonight. We need Pruitt's locker, his patrol logs for the past 24 months, and the complete records on every vehicle impoundment routed through this department in the last 3 years." The word impoundment landed differently than the other words. Macon went very still. A stillness that was not confusion. It was the stillness of a man whose internal accounting had just updated with information he had been hoping would never arrive. Dara watched his eyes and saw it, not fear, not yet, but the recognition that the fire was closer to the structure than he had believed. He knew what was in Pruitt's locker. He knew what the impoundment records would show, and the names connected to both. He could not stop it. Not with Webb's warrant and 20 agents in his parking lot. Harlan Macon said the wrong name. A slip corrected immediately to Pruitt. Can use room A. His voice had become fully bureaucratic, now stripped of aggression, and posturing the voice of a man conducting an orderly retreat while quietly burning documents in his head. His locker is down the south hall. He turned without looking at Pruitt, being brought out of the Suburban, a deliberate practiced non-acknowledgement, and walked back into the building. The doors swung shut behind him. Dara looked at Webb. He made a call before he said a word to us. I know, Webb said. Let's find out who he called. Interrogation room A of the Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department smelled of stale coffee and the compressed anxiety of a room that has held a great many difficult conversations. Institutional beige paint, a single two-way mirror, a metal table bolted to the floor, a steel bar below the table designed for exactly the purpose it was currently serving. Cole Pruitt sat with his wrists cuffed to that bar, stripped of his belt and badge and shoelaces. Without them, without the weight and architecture of everything the uniform signified. He was a heavy-set man in his mid-40s, staring at a table with a trembling lower lip, sitting in a room he had sat in before, on the other side of the table, where he had never once considered that the geometry could be reversed. Webb sat across from him with a thin folder. The folder was deliberately thin, designed to make Pruitt's mind work against him, to make him wonder what was not in it, what was being held back, what was waiting. Dara stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching, offering no emotional temperature for Pruitt to read and respond to. I know my rights, Pruitt said to the table. I haven't done anything wrong. I conducted a lawful traffic stop. The driver was non-compliant. I followed established protocol. Protocol, Webb repeated, with the careful neutrality of a man who has picked the word up off the floor to examine it. Walk me through the protocol, Pruitt. The specific part where you level a loaded weapon at a cooperating driver who has identified herself as a federal agent. She wasn't cooperating. She was reaching. She identified herself. She offered to retrieve credentials. She narrated every movement. Webb's voice remained even. You laughed at her. I thought it was fake. I've encountered fraudulent credentials before. And your established protocol for a suspected fraudulent ID is to draw your service weapon and aim it at the person's chest. Pruitt said nothing. He was holding on the reflex of a man who has never seriously been cornered and doesn't entirely believe this corner is real. It's my word against hers. Maybe the camera angle was bad. Maybe the audio is unclear. Maybe there's still a way through this. Agent Reyes walked in with a laptop. Set it on the table facing Pruitt. We've pulled the footage from Agent Okafor's dashcam unit. It uploads continuously to an encrypted cloud server. We also pulled the complete dispatch audio from the open line. She said the next part without inflection. Your body camera was malfunctioning. Again. Pruitt swallowed. Let's watch. Webb said. Reyes pressed play. Split screen. The forward lens showed Highway 9 straight and empty. Dara's lane. Discipline absolute. Not a deviation. Not a suggestion of movement toward the center line. The cabin view showed Dara, hands on the wheel, reaching for water. The flood of lights, her hands returning immediately to the wheel. Then Pruitt appeared. He watched himself approach. Heard his own voice through the speakers. Whose car is this? You expect me to believe that's yours? In the quiet room, stripped of the rain and the night and the confidence of the roadside, the words sounded different. They sounded like what they were not policing, not caution, not anything with a professional framework around it. Just contempt applied to a specific person for a specific reason. Then the gun came out on screen. Dara's hands were clearly visible, palms up. Fingers spread, the oldest human gesture of non-aggression. She was not reaching. She was surrendering. And Pruitt on the screen was shaking, escalating, screaming into a situation that he had created from nothing. I don't care about your fake badge. The footage ended. The silence in the room had physical weight. That Webb said quietly, pointing at the screen, is 18 years minimum. And that's before we opened the locker. Pruitt's face was gray. I was under personal pressure. My divorce, Pruitt, Dara said from the corner. He looked at her. The video is serious, she said. She pushed off the wall, walked to the table, placed a cardboard evidence box on the surface in front of him, and lifted the lid. Inside in a row were 8 driver's licenses, all women. From the photographs, all black. We opened your locker 20 minutes ago. These were in a Ziploc bag behind your spare uniform. Pruitt looked at the licenses. He did not look away from them. Renee Castile, Dara said. She picked up one of the licenses. She looked at the photograph, a young woman, 29, dark eyes, the slightly formal expression people wear for ID photos. Stopped on Highway 9 7 months ago. No arrest in the record. No ticket issued. No documentation of the stop in your log. But you kept her license. She set it down, picked up another. Tamara Wells, 10 months ago. Same story. She placed her hands flat on the table. We called Renee Castile on the drive over here, Pruitt. She looked at him directly. She's a traveling nurse. She was on her way to a night shift at a hospital in Shreveport the night you stopped her. She told us what you said you found in her car. She told us what you told her she needed to do if she didn't want to go to jail. Dara paused. She drove to the hospital that night. She sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. Then she went inside and worked a 12-hour shift, during which she helped resuscitate 2 patients and held the hand of a woman who was dying alone. She did all of that because she had no choice, because there were people inside that building who needed her, and she was not going to let what you did to her on the side of a road be the reason they didn't get her. She let that sit in the room. She never reported you. Dara continued. Because she didn't believe anyone would listen. Because you were the law. Because the institution she would have reported it to was yours. She straightened up. We have 8 licenses in this box. 8 women. And now that they know the DEA is in this building asking questions, they are going to talk to us. Every one of them. Pruitt put his head down. His shoulders convulsed, not the strategic performance of remorse, but the involuntary, ugly collapse of a man whose accounting has come due all at once. I want a deal, he said to the table. You'll get what the U.S. attorney decides to offer, Dara said. But understand this, Pruitt. You are going to federal prison, and everyone inside is going to know exactly what you did on Highway 9. Every detail. She turned to Webb. Book him. She walked out of room A. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall for exactly 4 seconds, eyes closed. Then she opened them and kept moving. Outside in the bullpen, the deputies of the Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department sat at their desks with the careful collective stillness of people who have understood that the situation has moved beyond anything they can affect and are now simply waiting to see what survives. No eye contact, no conversation above a murmur. The castle had been breached, and every person inside felt the walls shifting. Webb found Dara in the corridor outside the evidence room. He held up his phone, the audio feed from room A still live. Pruitt's voice stripped of everything except the urgent arithmetic of self-preservation. Macon runs a cash operation through a towing company on Parish Road 9. His brother-in-law owns the lot. Any car we impound that has cash, drugs, or anything of value, it doesn't go to evidence. It goes to the overflow lot. Cars get stripped. Cash gets split. Macon takes 60%. The product goes to dealers in the next parish over. Then, after a pause, Macon knew about the women. He knew what I was doing on Highway 9. He told me his exact words. Keep it off. Locals. Keep it off anyone who voted for me. And what happens on the asphalt stays on the asphalt. Dara stood in the corridor and listened to this with the specific nausea of confirmation, the feeling that is not quite surprise, because you already knew, but that hits differently when the knowing becomes hearing. She handed the phone back. Get me the warrant for his property. Tonight. Already on the phone with Judge Hollins, Webb said. Dara looked at him. Macon recognized her name when you said it. in the parking lot. His face changed. Webb nodded slowly. 3 years ago, Macon lobbied the State Judiciary Committee to block Hollins's appointment to the federal bench. She was on the short list for a district court vacancy. Macon put his thumb on the scale favors called in political pressure. She didn't get the appointment. He paused. She called back in 90 seconds and is signing the warrant right now. Dara thought about that for a moment. A man who had spent 22 years accumulating favors and leverage, and the one judge he had worked to push down, was the one sitting by the phone at midnight when the warrant request came in, and she had signed it in 90 seconds. "Get me the convoy," Dara said. The warrant was signed at 4:11 in the morning. By 4:47, the convoy was moving through the pre-dawn darkness of Calhoun Parish toward the private property of Sheriff Dale Macon, 12 acres on the parish's western edge, adjacent to a private reservoir, bought on a public servant's salary, in a manner that had apparently never occurred to anyone with investigative authority to question. Inside the ranch's oak-paneled study, looking out over the stable, Macon was feeding documents into a heavy-duty shredder. He had been doing it since leaving the department. Not running men like Macon do not run running, being an admission that produces exactly the kind of vulnerability he had spent 22 years working to ensure he never had, but moving with the quick, purposeful efficiency of a man who understands that a window is closing, and that what matters most right now is a specific black notebook on the desk behind him. The ledger. 3 years of entries in his own handwriting. The accounting of a shadow economy built on a badge. Names, amounts, dates, the distribution of proceeds through the towing operation. And on the third page, beside Cole Pruitt's name, a notation that Macon had written in ink and never imagined would be read by anyone but himself. H9. Keep quiet. Good earner. 27 pages left to shred when he heard the gravel. He stopped the machine. Listened. No sirens. That was the specific detail that turned his stomach cold, rather than anything else. The absence of sirens, because sirens would mean local and local. He could manage, and the absence of sirens meant something else entirely. He went to the window and looked through the blinds. The DEA Bearcat armored vehicle smashing through his front gate did not produce a dramatic sound, so much as a comprehensive one, the sound of wrought iron removing itself from hinges of a physical threshold that had felt permanent, discovering that it was not. Behind the Bearcat came 12 Suburban's headlights, cutting the pre-dawn dark wet grass, churning under their tires. FBI search warrant. Come out with your hands raised. Macon looked at the shredder. He looked at the remaining 27 pages of the ledger. He looked at the rifle on the wall. He looked at the phone in his hand, and whoever he had called from the parking lot at 1 in the morning had not answered in 3 subsequent attempts, which told him something definitive about the nature of loyalty when federal warrants are involved. He straightened his uniform jacket. He opened the front door. And Dale Macon, sheriff of Calhoun Parish for 22 years, walked out onto his porch with his hands raised above his head and the specific, diminished expression of a man encountering for the first time in his adult life a situation he cannot talk or threaten or leverage his way out of. Dara was at the front of the tactical line when Macon came out, full DEA gear, now plate carrier helmet, pushed back badge, prominently displayed on her chest over the body armor. No hoodie, no civilian ambiguity. Whatever lens Macon had chosen to see her through in the parking lot 4 hours ago, that lens was not available to him now. He walked down the porch steps and across the wet grass with his hands above his head, and in the combined searchlights of the helicopter and the vehicle floods, he looked for the first time his actual age. A large man in a uniform who had run out of moves, and who knew it, and who had enough pride left to refuse to perform anything about it. Sheriff Dale Macon. Dara's voice carried across the property clear and steady in the pre-dawn quiet. You are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, drug trafficking, racketeering, and obstruction of federal justice. As the agents moved in and the cuffs went on, Macon looked at her. He had one thing left. He used it. "You think you won?" he said. Low, controlled. A last performance of a man who still needed to believe he was capable of one. "You think this changes anything? There's always another Pruitt. There's always another me." Dara stepped close. She looked at him for a moment, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the clear, level gaze of someone who has been thinking about this answer since 8 driver's licenses were laid out in a row on a metal table. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but every one of them is going to remember what happened to you on Highway 9, and they're going to think twice." She held his gaze for one more second. "And the women they would have stopped, they get to drive home." She turned and walked toward the house. Behind her, as the agents led Macon across his own lawn, one of his horses watched from the fence of the stable, ears forward. Utterly indifferent to the collapse of the empire it had been housed in, Dara's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Subject Pruitt, dashcam archive. Complete recovery confirmed. 14 deleted incidents, all Highway 9, all female drivers. Beginning victim outreach now. She looked up at the sky. The first intimation of dawn was beginning at the eastern edge. Not light, yet just the sky's memory of the idea of light, thin and pale and growing. In the study behind her on the desk beside the shredder, the remaining 27 pages of the black ledger sat untouched. Macon had run out of time by exactly 27 pages. The federal trial that the New Orleans press would name the Calhoun Purge ran 6 days in the Hale Boggs Federal Building, a courtroom that smelled of floor wax, and the particular compressed anxiety of people who have been waiting for something for a long time and are not entirely certain they are going to receive it. It was packed every session. Gallery filled before the doors opened each morning. Overflow crowd in the corridor listening through the gap in the doorway. Local television ran daily segments. National outlets picked it up by day 3. In the front row of the gallery on the left side sat 11 women, different ages, different lives. A graduate student, a real estate agent from Bossier City, a retired school teacher from Opelousas, a shift manager from Lake Charles. They had in common exactly 3 things. They were black, they had driven Highway 9, and they had encountered Cole Pruitt. They had spent months, in some cases, years, not talking about what had happened on that road, for all the reasons that people in their position do not speak. Because they did not believe anyone would listen. Because the man who had done it was the law. Because the institution he worked for was the one they would have had to report it to. Now they sat in the front row of a federal courtroom, and they did not flinch, and they did not look away. Renee Castile sat at the far left of the row. 29 years old, traveling nurse from Shreveport, her hands folded in her lap. Her posture, the posture of someone who has learned to be still, when stillness is the only power available. She had told the DEA, Victim Services Team, everything, the stop what Pruitt had claimed to find in her car, what he had told her she needed to do to go home. She had told them about the 11 minutes in the hospital parking lot, about the 2 patients she had helped resuscitate that night, about the woman she had held the hand of who was dying alone. She had never told anyone those details before. Not her husband, not her mother. She had carried them for 7 months in the specific exhausting way that people carry things they have been given no permission to set down. She sat in the front row and looked at the back of Cole Pruitt's head for 6 days. Pruitt's defense attorney, a tired public defender who had drawn the assignment in the absence of anyone else volunteering, argued stress and isolation, the unique difficulties of rural law enforcement at night, the challenges of split-second decisions in high-pressure environments. The jury listened carefully. On day 3, the prosecution played the dashcam footage on the courtroom monitors. The courtroom was quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when they have stopped breathing collectively. On the screen, the empty road, the perfect lane, discipline, the hands on the wheel, the gun, clearing the holster, while those hands were visible and open and asking for nothing. 14 jurors, 2 had been excused, watched Officer Cole Pruitt draw a loaded weapon on a woman who had done nothing except exist in a car on a road at night. 2 jurors flinched when the barrel cleared the holster. 1 covered her mouth. But it was what came next that made the air in the courtroom change in a way that was physical and unmistakable. After the dashcam footage, the prosecution played the dispatch audio, the full audio. Not just the call, everything that the open line had captured, including the 43 seconds before the helicopter arrived, when Pruitt was alone on the side of the road and believed with complete certainty that no one was listening. In those 43 seconds, Pruitt laughed softly to himself, not from nerves, not from discomfort, from private amusement, the laugh of a man who is in that specific moment enjoying himself. And then his voice on the recording, just above a murmur, talking to no one, talking to the rain. Thought you were smart. Thought you had something. Highway 9, sweetheart. What happens out here doesn't go anywhere. The prosecutor stopped the playback. The courtroom remained perfectly, devastatingly silent. When the prosecutor spoke, her voice was very quiet, and it carried to every corner of the room. Officer Pruitt believed in those 43 seconds that he was completely alone, that no one was listening, that Highway 9 was still his. She looked at the jury. He was wrong about all of it. He had been wrong about all of it for 17 years. He just didn't know it until the helicopter showed up. She turned back to the monitor. She paused it on the audio waveform, the visual representation of those 43 seconds of laughter and certainty, and she let the silence stretch. What happens out here doesn't go anywhere, she repeated softly. Then, it went everywhere. Macon's defense collapsed on day 4, when the forensic laboratory's reconstruction of the shredded ledger was entered into evidence. 41 strips of paper, painstakingly reassembled into 32 legible pages. 3 years of Macon's handwriting. The names, the amounts, the dates, the split of proceeds through the towing operation on Parish Road 9. And on page 3, in Macon's own hand, beside Cole Pruitt's name, the notation the prosecutor read aloud to the courtroom, in a silence so complete it was almost reverential. H9, keep quiet, good earner. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 12 minutes. When the foreman stood, Pruitt was gripping the edge of the defense table. His knuckles were white. The tremor in his hands was visible from the gallery. Macon sat straight, a last performance of composure that was costing him visibly more than he had left to spend. On the count of assault, with a deadly weapon on a federal officer guilty. The word landed like the first stone into still water. The ripples spread. On the count of deprivation of rights under color of law guilty. On the count of unlawful detention guilty. 19 counts for Pruitt. Each one the same. Each one earned. On all counts pertaining to defendant Dale Macon, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, obstruction of justice, trafficking in contraband goods guilty. The gavel came down. In the front row of the gallery, Renee Castile closed her eyes. She kept them closed for 5 full seconds. When she opened them, she did not look at Pruitt. She looked at the 11 women beside her, and something passed between them that required no words. Sentencing was 4 weeks later before the Honorable District Judge Constance M. Beaumont, who had a professional reputation for precision and no reputation at all for sentimentalism. Pruitt stood in a suit that had been bought for this occasion and fit him the way such suits fit, with the approximation of someone who used to live in the body wearing it. He was smaller than he had been, not physically. In every way that matters more than physical. He was given the opportunity to make a statement. He said he was sorry. He said he had made mistakes. He cited stress and the difficulties of the job. Judge Beaumont listened with the expression of someone who has received this package before and opened it many times and knows precisely what is inside. "Mr. Pruitt," she said when he finished. Her voice carried without effort to every corner of the room. "You were given a badge by the people of this parish, That badge was a grant of trust. You used it as a hunting license. You used Highway 9 as your private trap and your uniform as the mechanism of the trap. And you did it for 17 years. And you did it to 8 women that we know about, and 14 more whose incidents you deleted from your own dashcam archive. She looked at him over the rim of her glasses. When you encountered someone who could hold you accountable, you pointed a loaded weapon at her chest. And in the 43 seconds you believed no one was listening, you told us everything we needed to know about what you are. She set her pen down. You will serve 18 years in a federal correctional facility without the possibility of parole. Macon's sentencing followed immediately. He had nothing to say. He stood straight and received the sentence with the expression of a man who has decided that the only dignity remaining is the appearance of receiving it cleanly. Sheriff Macon Judge Beaumont said, "You did not merely participate in corruption. You designed it, sustained it, protected it, and profited from it for more than 20 years. You used the machinery of law to grind down the people the law exists to protect. You covered for a predator because his predation was profitable to you. The scale and duration of your conduct and the number of lives it damaged or destroyed require a response commensurate with the harm." She adjusted her glasses. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Macon said nothing. He looked briefly at the ceiling, an involuntary glance, corrected immediately. Then he looked straight ahead as the agents moved in. Before they took Pruitt out, he looked across the courtroom at Dara. The distance between them was significant. The eye contact was direct. He held it for a moment with the expression of a man who has run out of time to understand the thing he most needs to understand. Dara looked back at him. She gave him one slow nod. Not of triumph, not of anger. The acknowledgement of a thing that happened a record, that was made a road that is different now than it was before. 6 weeks after sentencing, a corrections officer opened Cole Pruitt's isolation cell at a federal facility in Mississippi on a Tuesday morning. "Pack it up, Pruitt. You're moving to D Block. General population." Pruitt went pale. "There's a separation order. I submitted the paperwork. Computer says D Block." The guard looked at the wall. "Move." In federal facilities, paperwork moves through channels. Files pass through hands. Those hands belong to people, and people read charges, and the charges on Cole Pruitt's intake form were specific and detailed about what he had done to 8 women on a Louisiana highway over the course of years. Some paperwork moves quickly. Some moves slowly. Some gets lost in a way that is never quite explainable and never quite investigated. D Block was noise and steel and the layered smell of a confined place. As Pruitt walked onto the tier, the ambient sound of the block dropped the specific attentive quiet of a place that has received information it considers relevant. At lunch, Pruitt took his tray and aimed for an empty table in the corner with his head down. Pruitt. He knew the voice before he turned. He knew it the way you know certain things, not from memory exactly, but from guilt. A man named Darnell Tatum was sitting at a table 10 feet away. 4 years ago, Tatum had been stopped on Highway 9. A bag of narcotics had appeared in his vehicle with the efficiency of something placed rather than found. The conviction had cost Tatum his job, his apartment, and 3 years of his life. He had filed a complaint with the Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department. The complaint had been routed to Sheriff Macon's office. It had not been heard from again. Tatum was standing now. The men at his table were standing. In D Block, information moves faster than any official channel. Everyone on the tier already knew what the new fish had done. Everyone knew what kind of cop he was. Everyone knew about Highway 9. Pruitt dropped his tray. The contents hit the linoleum floor in slow motion. He stumbled backward into a corrections officer patrolling the aisle. He grabbed the officer's arm with both cuffed hands, and the panic in his voice was naked and total. the voice of a man who has never had to ask for help and doesn't know how to do it with any of the dignity that is no longer available to him. You have to help me. You have to get me out of here right now. They're going to. The officer looked at Pruitt's face. Then he looked at Darnell Tatum. A long moment of silence passed between them. The silent communication of a place where many things are understood that are never said. The officer reached down and methodically, one finger at a time, peeled Pruitt's hands off his uniform sleeve. I didn't see anything, the officer said. He turned his back and walked out of the cafeteria. The heavy door closed behind him with the sound of something that has decided. Cole Pruitt stood alone in the center of D Block's cafeteria, in the circle of men who had been waiting patiently for the particular arithmetic of this moment to resolve. And everything he had done on Highway 9 every night, every woman, every 43 seconds of private laughter in the rain, came to collect what it was owed with interest in full. 3 months after sentencing, the Calhoun Parish Sheriff's Department was formally dissolved by order of the Governor of Louisiana, acting on a federal recommendation. Its territory was absorbed by the state police under a new administrative structure requiring mandatory body cameras for all officers' real-time upload of all traffic stop footage to a secure state server, and an independent civilian oversight board with full subpoena power. The towing operation on Parish Road 9 was seized, its assets liquidated, the proceeds directed to a victim compensation fund. 14 additional women were identified from Pruitt's recovered dashcam archive and contacted directly by the DEA's Victim Services team. All 14 had driven Highway 9. Not one of them had believed before Dara Okafor's name appeared in the news that anyone with the authority to act would ever actually act. Renee Castile gave a single statement to the press outside the federal courthouse in New Orleans on the day the department's dissolution was announced. She did not perform grief. She did not perform triumph. She said that she was glad her daughter would grow up driving Highway 9 without being afraid. She said that for a long time, she had believed that what happened on the asphalt stayed on the asphalt. She said she was grateful to have been wrong. Then she went home. Months later, on a warm Louisiana evening, when the last of the summer heat had finally broken and left the air with the clean, particular quality that follows a long season of wait, Dara Okafor drove Highway 9 with the windows of the Explorer all the way down, alone, off-duty, jeans and a linen shirt, the radio playing something low and unhurried, no government windbreaker, no reason to check the mirror every 30 seconds. The pine flatlands on either side of the highway were catching the last of the day's light and turning it gold the way this part of Louisiana turns everything gold at the end of the day, as if making a case for itself. She slowed as she approached mile marker 34. The gravel shoulder was there unchanged. Ordinary, a strip of pale stone at the edge of the asphalt, indistinguishable from 10,000 other shoulders on 10,000 other rural roads. The pine trees pressed in on both sides. A mockingbird was cycling through its catalog, somewhere in the branches to her left, unhurried, running through everything it knew. The air smelled of pine resin and the faint sweetness of cut grass from a field somewhere nearby. There was nothing here to mark what had happened. No memorial. No record visible from the road. The world had moved on in the way the world does, indifferently, continuously, with no particular interest in the scale of what had changed here. Dara sat with the engine running and looked at the shoulder. She thought about Renee Castile sitting in a hospital parking lot for 11 minutes before going inside to do her job. She thought about 14 women whose deleted footage had been recovered from a corrupt officer's dashcam archive, 14 nights that someone had believed would never be seen, and that had been seen. She thought about Pruitt in D Block and Macon staring at a permanent wall somewhere in Louisiana, and the black ledger reconstructed from 41 strips of shredded paper, and a magistrate judge who had signed a federal warrant in 90 seconds at midnight because she had a very specific reason not to hesitate. She thought about Renee Castile's daughter. She thought about the women who would drive this road tonight and tomorrow night and every night going forward, and not know that anything had changed here, because they would not need to know. Because the thing that had changed here was simply that the road was a road again, a stretch of asphalt between one place and another, no more dangerous than it had any right to be. She shifted into third gear. The engine of the black Ford Explorer responded with the sound of something that has enough power and intends to use it cleanly, and she accelerated into the last of the light. The road ahead was clear. It had cost something to make it clear. That was enough. That's the story of how one corrupt officer on one dark Louisiana road picked exactly the wrong woman to stop, and how by the following morning, the entire machine he served had begun to come apart. Power reveals who a person really is, and no badge, no matter how long it has gone unquestioned, is strong enough to hold against the truth forever. Officer Pruitt thought he was the law. He found out the hard way that there is always a bigger jurisdiction. If this story hit you, if you believe accountability matters, subscribe to our channel. We cover the moments when the powerful finally answer for what they've done. Was 18 years enough for Pruitt? Was life in prison the right sentence for Macon? Type justice if you think they got what they deserved, or tell us in the comments if you think the sentence should have been longer. Stay safe out there.